Hello. Before we begin tonight's quiet journey, I invite you to let your shoulders loosen, your breath slow, and your thoughts drift gently away from the weight of the day. You are about to step into the life of a medieval knight, not the kind from tales of glory or shining tournaments, but the real one. Slow mornings, quiet duties, endless discipline, and the soft rhythm of a world lit by firelight. This is not a story of battle. It is a story of routine, of responsibility, of calm repetition. A life built on service rather than spectacle. As you listen, there is nothing you need to remember, nothing you must do. Simply follow the soft footsteps of a knight moving through a single, ordinary day in the Middle Ages. A day shaped by steady hands, deep breaths, and the peaceful rhythm of duty. Whenever you're ready, we begin. Long before the sun rose, a medieval knight's day began in quiet darkness. The manor sat in stillness, its wooden beams groaning softly in the cool morning air. Servants, moving carefully so as not to disturb the household too soon, lit small lanterns to push back the shadows. In a corner room, the knight stirred awake on a simple straw mattress, wrapped in wool blankets that held faint scents of smoke from last night's fire. His chamber was not lavish, far from the grand halls of stories. A wooden chest at the foot of the bed held garments and a few personal belongings. A sword leaned against the wall, not polished for display, but ready for use. Before rising, he took a moment to breathe deeply, listening to the faint sounds of the manor awakening. Footsteps on creaking floors, distant whispers, a dog barking softly outside. He washed his face with cold water from a clay basin, the shock of it clearing his mind. Dressing was a slow ritual: linen shirt, wool tunic, thick hose, leather belt. Armor would come later. For now, the knight prepared his mind for a day shaped by discipline, duty, and the quiet routines expected of someone who lived not for glory, but for service. The sun had not yet touched the horizon, but the day had already begun. In the manor's small hall, a simple breakfast awaited. The knight sat at a long wooden table alongside household retainers and squires in training. There was no grand feast, just coarse bread, a bowl of warm porridge, and watered ale. The fire crackled gently, pushing away the chill that lingered from the night. Conversations were soft, respectful. The young squires watched the knight carefully, noting his posture, his calm movements, the way he broke his bread. A knight, after all, was a living example, discipline embodied in daily life. Servants moved quietly between tables, refilling bowls and setting out wooden cups. Outside, the courtyard stirred with faint sounds, horses shifting in their stalls, the clink of metal as someone sharpened tools for the day's work. The knight ate slowly, conserving energy. A day could be unpredictable: training, travel, inspections, meetings with the Lord, or hours spent riding through the estate. When the meal ended, he offered a small nod of thanks to the household staff and stood. Morning light finally filtered through narrow windows. It was time to begin his duties. Before stepping into the courtyard, the knight visited the armory, a modest room filled with equipment, each piece hanging from wooden pegs or resting on simple stands. The air smelled of oil, leather, and cold iron. His squire, eager and focused, presented the cleaned armor from the previous evening. Breastplate, greaves, gauntlets, coif. Each item required constant care to withstand weather and wear. Armor was not worn every day, but it was inspected daily. Rust was an ever-present threat. The knight ran his fingers along the polished steel, checking for cracks, dents, or loose straps. Swords were examined next. The blade was wiped clean of moisture, sharpened with slow, deliberate strokes. The sword was both a tool and a responsibility, requiring more attention than most imagined. The shield, worn from training and past use, bore scratches that told quiet stories. The knight lifted it, feeling its familiar weight. His squire watched closely, learning through observation more than words. When the inspection was complete, armor was set aside until training. The knight strapped on his belt, hung the sword at his hip, and stepped outside. The day's true work awaited. The training yard was already alive with movement when the knight arrived. Wooden targets lined the edges, straw dummies stood ready for sword practice, and a long field stretched wide for riding drills. Squires swung wooden swords under the supervision of older men-at-arms, their blows uneven but enthusiastic. The knight joined them without ceremony, taking a practice sword from a rack. Training was as essential as breathing. A knight who neglected it was a knight unprepared. He practiced basic strikes first, slow, controlled movements that warmed muscles and sharpened focus. The rhythmic thud of wood against straw filled the air. Afterward came footwork, steps measured carefully across the packed earth. Precision mattered. A misplaced step could cost a life in battle. Next, he moved to the tilting area, where he practiced handling a lance on horseback. His destrier, a powerful warhorse, snorted and pawed at the ground impatiently. Mounting with practiced ease, the knight guided the horse forward, lowering the lance toward a wooden target. Each run demanded balance, timing, and trust between rider and steed. Training continued until sweat dampened his tunic and breath grew heavy, but the knight remained steady, calm, disciplined. Training was not about glory, it was routine, ritual, responsibility. After training, the knight's responsibilities shifted. He walked the manor grounds with the steward, inspecting fences, storerooms, and livestock. Knights were not merely warriors. They were managers, responsible for the land granted to them by their lord. Winter had left its marks, and repairs were needed. The knight listened as workers described broken gates, leaking roofs, and sick animals. He responded with measured decisions: where to allocate wood, which field to prioritize, which families needed assistance. He visited the villagers next. Medieval life depended on cooperation, and the knight's presence was both symbolic and practical. He checked on a family whose roof had collapsed in snow, ensuring they received extra timber. He spoke with the miller about grain supplies, inspected the blacksmith's workshop, and inquired about travelers who had recently passed through. These tasks were quiet but vital. A well-run estate ensured stability, loyalty, and food for the coming seasons. By midday, the sun had climbed high, warming the earth slightly. The knight paused briefly to drink water from a leather flask. The afternoon would bring more responsibilities, but this gentle rhythm, part leadership, part vigilance, was the true fabric of a knight's life. Training the squire was one of the knight's most important daily tasks, a quiet responsibility handed down through generations. In the late morning light, the knight led the boy to an open patch of ground beside the training yard. Here, the earth was packed firm from years of drills, footsteps, and sparring. The squire stood ready with a wooden practice sword, too long for him, slightly uneven in weight, yet held with determination. The knight began by demonstrating a basic stance: feet firm, knees flexed, shoulders relaxed. "Balance first," he said softly. "Strength comes later." The squire imitated his posture, wobbling slightly. The knight moved behind him, adjusting an elbow, straightening a wrist. He spoke calmly, never raising his voice. Medieval discipline was slow, deliberate. There was no point in shouting. Progress required patience. They practiced the same strike again and again, the wooden sword tapping softly against a straw dummy. Between drills, the knight explained subtle concepts. How breathing controlled movement, how a misplaced step could throw off timing, how awareness mattered more than aggression. The boy listened intently, cheeks flushed with effort. When fatigue set in, the knight handed him a small flask of water and allowed a short rest. Training was not meant to break the body, but to shape the mind. As they resumed, the squire's movements grew steadier, guided by the knight's quiet encouragement. By the lesson's end, sweat darkened the boy's tunic, and his breathing was heavy, but his stance, finally, was correct. The knight nodded once in quiet approval. Another small step toward knighthood had been taken, as modest and slow as medieval life itself. After the squire returned to his duties, the knight made his way to a dim stone chamber behind the stables where the estate's armorer worked. The armorer was an elderly man with hands weathered by decades of shaping metal. Tools hung neatly on wooden beams, and pieces of armor lay scattered across a heavy table. Gauntlets awaiting new straps, a dented helmet in need of hammering, chainmail requiring reinforcement. The knight placed his equipment upon the table, and together they examined each piece. The armorer lifted the breastplate, tilting it toward the window so sunlight revealed scratches invisible in dim light. "This section must be strengthened," he murmured, "and this buckle needs replacing." His voice was steady, factual, lacking any sense of urgency. Repairs were part of the daily rhythm. He inspected the chainmail next, running calloused fingers across thousands of tiny links. One weakened ring could fail at the worst moment. The knight listened carefully, nodding at each recommendation. They discussed the optimal thickness for padding, the best oils for preventing rust, and the small adjustments needed for comfort during long rides. Though unspectacular, this dialogue was essential. Armor was not decoration, it was survival. Before leaving, the knight thanked the armorer with genuine respect. In the world of medieval warfare, craftsmanship and trust held nearly as much importance as skill with a blade. When the chapel bell sounded, the manor paused. Even in times of peace, a knight's strength was believed to come as much from faith as from training. The knight removed his sword at the chapel door, a sacred gesture, before stepping into the quiet stone interior. Sunlight filtered through narrow slits in the wall, illuminating motes of dust drifting slowly in the air. The chapel was simple, a wooden altar, a worn tapestry depicting a humble saint, a few rows of benches smoothed by years of hands and robes. The knight knelt on the cold floor, clasping his hands in silent prayer. He prayed for patience, courage, protection for his family, and wisdom for decisions that carried consequences beyond himself. Prayers were not desperate pleas. They were part of discipline, a way to align one's thoughts before stepping back into duty. Around him, servants, stewards, and squires murmured their own prayers. The chapel smelled of beeswax and old wood, peaceful and grounding. When the knight rose, he felt renewed, not from divine revelation, but from the quiet clarity that prayer brought. He buckled his sword once more and stepped back into the sunlight, ready for the next set of tasks. The noon meal at the manor was modest yet intentional. The knight joined the rest of the household at a long wooden table in the great hall. The room was warmer than usual, thanks to a large fire crackling in the stone hearth. Servants brought bowls of thick vegetable stew seasoned with herbs dried last autumn. Bread loaves, slightly coarse, were passed down the table. A small wheel of cheese sat in the center, reserved for those who performed the hardest labor that morning. The knight ate slowly, observing the quiet efficiency of the household. Men-at-arms sat near the center, discussing repairs to the training yard. The steward reviewed supply ledgers even as he ate. Young squires quietly copied the knight's posture, trying to appear disciplined. Conversation remained subdued. Even meals were governed by medieval politeness. When finished, the knight rinsed his hands in a basin of cool water brought by a servant. There was no leisure, no lingering. Meals restored strength, nothing more. The knight stood, tightened his belt, and headed toward the stables, for the afternoon belonged to the horse. The stables were filled with the warm scents of hay, leather, and the earthy presence of horses. Ardent, the knight's destrier, stood in the largest stall, muscular, intelligent, and trained for years to respond to subtle cues. Grooming began with slow, steady brushstrokes, smoothing the thick coat while checking for cuts or soreness. The horse lowered its head, releasing a deep breath of contentment. The knight then inspected the hooves, cleaning out stones caught during the morning ride. Ardent was more than transportation. He was a partner who shared the weight of armor, shield, and lance. After saddling and adjusting the bridle, the knight led the horse into the courtyard. With a single practiced motion, he mounted. Together they moved into the open fields, beginning with a slow trot that eventually shifted into a steady canter. Training was not aggressive or hurried. It was about synchronization, how the knight's breath aligned with the horse's rhythm, how balance shifted with each hoof step. The world around them fell quiet except for the soft thud of hooves on earth. These moments of unity forged an unspoken bond essential for battle, patrols, and ceremonial duties alike. After horse training, the knight rode beyond the manor to inspect the surrounding lands. Patrols were routine, not heroic. He followed dirt roads lined with hedgerows, passing cottage gardens and fields prepared for planting. Farmers paused their work to greet him politely, reassured by his presence. Sometimes he stopped to examine a broken fence or a damaged footbridge. Though these tasks seemed small, estate stability depended on attention to such details. The knight checked on a family whose roof had collapsed during winter storms. He ensured they had the timber promised by the steward. He reviewed the mill near the river, listening as the miller explained issues caused by ice thaw. Patrols revealed the condition of the land, the needs of villagers, and potential threats, from stray wolves to disputes between tenant families. For the knight, this peaceful ride was not leisure, it was governance. By the time he returned to the manor, the sun had begun its slow descent, but the day's work was far from over. In the late afternoon, the knight was summoned to the great hall for a council meeting with the manor's lord. The hall, cooled by thick stone walls, carried the smell of burning oak from the hearth. The lord sat at a carved wooden chair with maps and parchments spread before him. The knight stood respectfully until invited to sit. The council discussed matters ranging from upcoming tax collection to the maintenance of roads leading to neighboring territories. Reports were shared about recent travelers, grain storage, and rumors from nearby towns. The knight listened carefully, offering insight when necessary. Always concise, never boastful. He reported the conditions observed during his patrol, noted any damages requiring attention, and spoke of villagers in need. Governance in the Middle Ages was not rapid. It moved slowly, shaped by observation and local knowledge rather than distant politics. When the council concluded, the knight bowed respectfully. The meeting was simple yet vital, reinforcing the delicate order that held the estate together. As the sky began to fade into soft shades of amber, the knight returned to the training yard for evening drills. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of damp soil. Practice swords lay in neat rows along a wooden rack. The knight selected one, feeling its weight in his hand before beginning a series of disciplined strikes. Men-at-arms joined him, their movements synchronized in practiced formation. These drills were not for display. They were muscle memory, shaping reflexes through repetition. Sweat gathered beneath the knight's tunic as he moved through defensive stances, footwork sequences, and slow-motion sparring. The courtyard echoed with the controlled rhythm of wood striking wood. Training at sunset held a different tone than the morning, less rigorous, more meditative. With each controlled breath and deliberate strike, the knight quieted the mind, returning to the centered calm expected of someone who might be called to service at any time. Supper, unlike the midday meal, held a sense of closure. The great hall was dimly lit by torches placed along the stone walls. Shadows danced softly across tapestries depicting old battles and distant saints. The evening meal consisted of boiled grains, roasted root vegetables, and a modest portion of fish or poultry. A pitcher of watered wine passed down the table. The knight ate quietly, listening as servants shared small updates about the manor's tasks completed that day. Children of the household whispered among themselves, careful not to disturb the calm. Dogs lay curled near the hearth, dozing peacefully. Supper was not a celebration. It was a gentle winding down. When the meal ended, the knight stood, offered gratitude to those who prepared it, and withdrew with deliberate peace. Night was nearing. After supper, the knight returned to his chamber, a small room warmed by embers carried from the hall's hearth. Sitting on a wooden bench, he removed his sword belt and placed it carefully on its stand. This was his quiet hour, the only part of the day truly his own. He reflected on duties completed, mistakes made, and decisions awaiting him tomorrow. Medieval life left little room for idleness. Even rest carried intention. Sometimes he wrote notes on a piece of parchment, messages for the steward, reminders for training, or personal reflections. Other times he simply closed his eyes, listening to the muffled sounds of the manor settling for the night. Outside, the wind whispered through cracks in the shutters, but inside the room was still. Reflection was not indulgence, it was responsibility. A knight who failed to examine his actions risked losing his sense of purpose. As dusk deepened, the manor grew quieter. Servants hurried through final chores, extinguishing excess torches, checking the stables one last time, securing the outer gates. The courtyard emptied, leaving only faint echoes of footsteps on cobblestone. The knight stepped outside briefly to breathe the cool evening air. The sky was brushed with deep hues of violet, and the first stars began to glimmer. A distant owl hooted from the woods. Smoke curled gently from chimneys, carrying the scent of burning oak. The manor, which had pulsed with activity all day, now exhaled into stillness. It was a different kind of peace, soft, fragile, delicate. The knight lingered for a moment, hands clasped behind his back, appreciating the calm. Duty was constant, but even duty allowed a moment to acknowledge the beauty of dusk in the medieval world. Before retiring for the knight made his rounds with the guards. Together they walked the perimeter walls, lanterns in hand. The stone underfoot was cool and slightly damp from the day's fading warmth. Guards reported their observations, No unusual movements near the forest, no travelers approaching after sundown. Lantern light flickered across the armored helmets resting on racks, casting elongated shadows. The knight checked that each gate was properly barred, each torch safely extinguished to avoid stray fires. Even in peaceful times, vigilance shaped survival. The guards appreciated his presence, leadership built through action, not words. When the patrol ended, he thanked them quietly and wished them an uneventful night. Returning to the courtyard, the knight found his squire waiting, dusty, tired, but determined. The boy delivered an evening report, detailing tasks completed, the repaired practice dummies, cleaned saddles, sharpened training swords, and the updated inventory of arrows. He spoke carefully, choosing words with respect. The knight listened with patience, correcting small errors gently. Training a squire extended beyond physical drills. It was shaping responsibility. Before dismissing him, the knight offered a final piece of advice for the day. Growth comes from consistency, not haste. The boy bowed deeply before retiring to his small room near the stables. The knight watched him go, remembering his own years as a squire, long days, humble tasks, and the slow awakening of discipline. The cycle continued. By the time night fully settled, the manor was cloaked in soft darkness. Only a few lanterns flickered along the main hall. Servants had finished their duties and retreated to their own quarters. Horses shifted softly in the stables, rustling straw. The knight walked across the courtyard, the cobblestones cool beneath his boots. The air smelled of night, moisture, earth, and distant pine. Above him, stars spread across the sky with gentle clarity. Medieval nights were deep and vast, unbroken by artificial light. The knight paused, letting the calmness settle into his bones. This was the moment when the weight of the day finally lifted. Everything was still, as if the world held its breath. The knight entered his chamber quietly. A small oil lamp cast a warm glow across the wooden walls. On a stool lay the tunic he would wear tomorrow. His sword rested in its stand, reflecting faint golden light. He removed his boots, stretching his sore legs. The day's physical demands, training, riding, inspections, left a familiar heaviness in his body. He poured a small amount of water into a clay basin and washed his hands and face, letting the coolness soothe him. Afterward, he knelt briefly for a final prayer, thanking God for the strength to complete his duties and asking for protection over the manor through the night. Rising slowly, he extinguished the lamp, leaving the room dim except for the moonlight leaking through the shutter gaps. Before lying down, the knight sat on the edge of his straw-filled mattress, reflecting one last time. A knight's burden was rarely about battle. It was about stewardship, example, and the quiet vigilance expected every day. He thought of the villagers who depended on his decisions, the squire relying on his guidance, the lord trusting his counsel. Responsibility in the Middle Ages was not a title, it was a rhythm of constant service. The knight inhaled deeply, acknowledging these truths without resentment. Duty gave his life shape and meaning. Only when he felt his thoughts settle did he finally lie back, pulling the wool blanket over his shoulders. The last embers of the manor's great hearth burned low, casting faint orange light across the hall. Those embers, barely glowing, mirrored the knight's final moments of wakefulness. His breathing slowed, matching the gentle crackle of wood cooling in the distance. The castle around him seemed to exhale into silence. Even the dogs had curled up in warm corners. The knight shifted once, adjusting the blanket, then lay still. The sounds of the manor, distant, soft, layered, lulled him towards sleep. A faint rustling in the rafters, the occasional thump of settling wood, a whisper of wind against the shutters. Medieval nights had a weight to them, a density of quiet that filled every corner. And in that heavy silence, the knight finally closed his eyes. As sleep took hold, the knight's dreams returned him to familiar places. He saw the training yard at dawn, mist clinging to the ground. He heard the soft thud of practice swords, the snort of horses waking, the call of the steward counting supplies. Dreams did not bring glory or fantasy. They brought repetition, a reflection of the life he lived. He dreamt of adjusting a squire's stance, of brushing his warhorse's mane, of examining armor beneath morning light. These dreams were calm, slow, steady, like the knight himself. They were not escapes from reality, but extensions of it. In the medieval world, dreams were often seen as messages or omens, but to the knight, they were simply the mind's way of continuing the rhythm of duty. Near midnight, the manor lay in deep rest. No footsteps echoed, no voices carried. The moon hung low above the walls, casting silver lines across the courtyard. The knight slept soundly, wrapped in wool blankets. His sword stood nearby, always within reach even in times of peace. The world outside remained undisturbed. Only the forest stirred quietly, an owl shifting on a branch, leaves rustling gently. Medieval nights held a unique serenity, untouched by the noise of later centuries. The night's breathing blended into that silence, steady and peaceful. The hours passed slowly, as if time itself honored the stillness of the manor. During the deepest hours of the night woke briefly, not from danger, but from habit. Years of training had attuned his senses to even the slightest sound. He sat upright, listening. The manor remained quiet. The guards patrolled with soft footsteps. A dog barked once, then quieted. Satisfied, he lay back down. This momentary awakening was not fear. It was vigilance, the residue of a life built on readiness. Even in the comfort of his own hall, the knight remained connected to the rhythms of the night. Soon sleep reclaimed him, deeper and more restful than before. While he slept, the manor's people rested as well, trusting in the stability he helped maintain. The knight's reputation was not one of spectacle or heroism. He was known for calm judgment, steady leadership, and fairness. These qualities shaped how villagers approached him, with respect, not fear. A knight's legacy was built slowly, through years of consistent service. Stories of bravery mattered less than reliability. Even the youngest children understood that he was someone who protected, guided, and listened. This quiet reputation made him a pillar of the estate's sense of safety. And as he slept, the manor slept with him, resting beneath the quiet assurance of his presence. As dawn approached, the sky softened from deep indigo to pale gray. Birds began their faint morning calls. The air outside chilled slightly, carrying the scent of dew settling on grass. In his chamber, the knight stirred, not yet fully awake, but sensing morning's approach. Dawn in the medieval world did not need clocks. It announced itself subtly, through sound, light, and temperature. Soon the manor would awaken again with the familiar rhythm of chores, training, and duties. The knight shifted beneath his blankets, feeling the first awareness of the new day rising slowly around him. Servants were the first to rise, as always. Their footsteps echoed through the hallway, soft but purposeful. A few carried buckets of water, others rekindled the fires in the kitchen. The night squire awoke early as well, eager to prepare his master's gear. In the courtyard, the stable hands brushed horses and arranged feed. The manor inhaled deeply, waking from the night's long exhale. The knight opened his eyes, listening to these familiar sounds, comforting, predictable, grounding. A new day had begun, shaped by the same quiet responsibilities that defined his life. Rising from the bed, he stretched, feeling the stiffness from yesterday's training fade. Duty, steady as ever, waited just beyond the chamber door. The knight washed his face with cold water from the basin, the chill fully awakening him. He dressed in a fresh linen shirt and tied his belt with practiced ease. He checked his sword, running a thumb along the blade's edge, not out of fear, but out of ritual. Medieval life was built on routines, and this simple inspection centered his thoughts. Before leaving his chamber, he took a moment to pray softly, asking for clarity, humility, and strength. These morning rituals were not dramatic, they were foundational. The knight stepped into the hallway, greeted by the warm glow of newly lit torches. The day awaited, with all its demands, lessons, and quiet responsibilities. With the morning fully arrived, the knight returned to the great hall for the first meal of the day. Servants moved efficiently, placing bowls of porridge and bread on the table. The squire stood straight, eager to begin his tasks. Outside, the sun cast its first rays across the courtyard, illuminating the training yard where today's drills would soon resume. The knight took a slow breath, embracing the familiar rhythm. Medieval life was not defined by extraordinary moments, but by steady cycles: training, governance, duty, reflection. The day ahead would look much like the one before and the one before that. But in this repetition, the knight found purpose. As he stepped forward to begin his tasks, the cycle renewed itself, quiet, disciplined, and unwavering. Soon after finishing his morning meal, the knight met with the steward, who awaited him in the courtyard carrying a wooden tablet filled with notes. The steward's face showed the tiredness of someone who rose before dawn to check storerooms, tally grain barrels, and speak with villagers already beginning their chores. The knight listened attentively as the steward listed concerns: a section of the south fence weakened by winter storms, a pig that had fallen ill overnight, a farmer requesting assistance with tools damaged by frost, and a delivery of flour running behind schedule due to muddy roads. The knight responded calmly, assigning tasks with measured clarity. He directed carpenters to the weakened fence, arranged for the pig to be inspected by the manor's animal handler, and approved the loan of tools to the farmer with the agreement they would later be repaired. Medieval estates survived on this kind of daily attention, nothing dramatic, but each task essential. When the report ended, the knight thanked the steward, recognizing the weight he carried. Respect flowed both ways. Roles were distinct, yet deeply linked. As the steward hurried off to relay orders, the knight took a deep breath of cool morning air. The day, barely begun, was already shaping itself around quiet responsibilities. None of it loud, none of it heroic, yet all of it vital to the quiet stability of medieval life. The knight made his way toward the blacksmith's workshop near the manor gate. The rhythmic clanging of hammer on metal echoed through the air long before he reached it. Inside, the blacksmith worked shirtless despite the chill, his skin glistening from the heat of the forge. Sparks flew as he shaped a glowing horseshoe on the anvil. When he noticed the knight, he paused respectfully. The knight examined tools laid out on a wooden bench: new nails, repaired hinges, a freshly sharpened plow blade. The blacksmith reported on upcoming needs: replacement hinges for barn doors, arrowheads requiring the finest iron, and a wheel rim needing reinforcement before spring rains softened the roads. Together they reviewed each piece of equipment with slow consideration. The knight understood that well-made ironwork was the backbone of both peace and warfare. He approved the requisition for additional iron bars, then asked about the condition of the weapons stored for the militia. The blacksmith nodded and promised they would be inspected before dusk. Before leaving, the knight placed a hand on the blacksmith's shoulder, a rare gesture of appreciation in the medieval world. The workshop smelled of smoke, sweat, and iron. It was a place where raw material transformed into something reliable, mirroring the knight's own daily shaping of discipline. As he stepped out into the courtyard again, the clangs resumed, steady as a heartbeat. Late morning brought an unusual task, a lesson in heraldry for pages of the household. The children gathered in a small chamber lined with faded banners, each depicting animal emblems, geometric lines, and ancient family symbols. The knight stood before them, explaining the meaning of colors: gold for generosity, red for courage, black for constancy. He pointed to devices like lions, falcons, and towers, describing the virtues each represented. Heraldry might seem decorative, but in medieval society it served as identity, communication, and legacy. Knights recognized allies and enemies by these markings on shields and surcoats. The children listened wide-eyed as the knight traced shapes in the air, retelling stories of how these symbols came to be. He emphasized that a coat of arms was not a trophy, it was a burden to uphold. A symbol means nothing, he said gently, unless your actions give it weight. The pages repeated the motto of the manor, their young voices soft but earnest. Watching them, the knight felt a familiar mixture of pride and responsibility. These children would one day carry the household's future. The lesson ended with quiet bows of respect. When the knight stepped back into the corridor, the flickering torchlight illuminated the banners, their colors glowing faintly, as if remembering the long line of ancestors who bore them. Just as the knight prepared to return to his training, a distant horn echoed from beyond the manor walls. A messenger on horseback approached, his cloak dusty from travel. The guards opened the gate, and the man slid from his horse with weary movements. The knight came forward as the messenger knelt briefly in respect before presenting a sealed parchment. The seal bore the crest of a neighboring lord. Breaking it carefully, the knight read the letter, a request for assistance in resolving a land dispute near the border. Nothing urgent, nothing perilous, but matters between lords required careful handling. The knight folded the letter and asked the messenger whether he needed food or rest. Grateful, the man accepted. While servants tended to him and his horse, the knight considered the implications of the request. Disputes over grazing land or damaged boundaries could escalate if mishandled. Medieval politics were rarely theatrical. They were slow tensions simmering beneath daily life. The knight decided he would visit the neighboring estate within the next 2 days. Duty, once again, adjusted the rhythm of his week. He stored the letter carefully and headed toward the hall to inform his lord, each step steady, measured, prepared. With correspondence complete, the knight returned to the training grounds for a session focused on advanced sword forms. Unlike the earlier drills shared with squires, this practice was solitary and precise. He began with simple cuts, letting the sword glide through the air with controlled force. Then he moved into flowing patterns, diagonal sweeps, defensive parries, and circular motions meant to deflect an opponent's blade. His feet shifted steadily across the dirt, producing a soft rhythm: step, pivot, exhale. Sword forms were not designed for spectacle, but for internal refinement. They strengthened discipline, balance, and calm under pressure. Occasionally, a man-at-arms would freeze mid-task to watch the knight's graceful precision. Sweat beaded on his brow, but his breathing stayed even. The sound of the blade moving through the air blended with distant chatter from the stables and the muted clamor of the smithy. When the session ended, the knight wiped the blade carefully and bowed toward the empty yard, a silent acknowledgement of the discipline that shaped him. These private moments were as important as any public duty. Through them, the knight sharpened not only his weapon but his character. Mid-afternoon brought a visit to the falconer, whose small hut stood at the edge of the manor's fields. Falconry was both art and tradition among the nobility. The falconer greeted the knight while tightening the leather jesses on a resting peregrine. Inside the hut, feathers and small tools lay arranged neatly. The knight inspected the birds, sleek, alert creatures with sharp eyes and calm poise. The falconer reported on their health, mentioning one young bird needing more training and another recovering from a strained wing. Medieval falconry required endless patience. Birds could not be forced, only guided. The knight extended a gloved hand, and the peregrine stepped onto it with dignified precision. He admired its steady gaze, feeling an almost symbolic connection. Two disciplined creatures bound by instinct and training. After discussing upcoming hunts and the bird's readiness, the knight thanked the falconer. The world outside seemed quieter after leaving the hut, as if the silent intensity of the falcons lingered in the air. Falconry was not a daily necessity, but it deepened the manor's culture and offered moments of stillness that complemented the knight's responsibilities. With the afternoon sun mellowing into gentle warmth, the knight took a slow walk through the estate's fields. Farmers tending early crops straightened to greet him respectfully. Rows of cabbages, barley, and beans stretched in well-ordered patterns. He examined the soil, running it through his fingers, a habit learned from years of land stewardship. Medieval knights were expected to understand the basics of farming, for a poorly maintained estate could not sustain soldiers, animals, or families. The knight asked farmers about soil conditions, early signs of pests, and whether they needed additional tools or laborers. The conversations were brief but meaningful. A knight's presence among the fields reassured people, reminding them their work was valued. Children carrying bundles of firewood watched with wide eyes, whispering as he passed. There was no grand heroism here, just steady interaction between leader and community. As he walked back toward the manor, the breeze carried the scent of earth and young plants, reminding him that peace, though fragile, allowed these fields to flourish. The simplicity of the moment grounded him, reinforcing that true medieval life was woven from countless small connections. Late afternoon brought preparation for the upcoming visit to the neighboring estate. The knight summoned his squire and instructed him to ready the traveling gear. A simple bedroll, a small satchel of bread and dried fruit, flint for fire starting, and a lightweight cloak suitable for unpredictable weather. The knight reviewed maps of the border region with the steward, marking areas where disputes historically occurred. Land disagreements were often about access to rivers, forest rights, or grazing pastures. Issues mundane, yet deeply impactful on medieval survival. The knight wrote a short, courteous reply to the neighboring lord, confirming his intent to arrive soon. He sealed the message with wax and instructed a messenger to deliver it before dusk. These preparations unfolded calmly, without haste. Medieval travel required forethought, but it was not rushed. As the knight finalized the arrangements, the estate hummed quietly around him. Servants carrying firewood, animals settling for the evening, squires ending their training. The knight folded the map carefully and felt a familiar readiness. Another responsibility awaited, and he would meet it with the same steady composure as all others. Before supper, the knight walked to the small infirmary near the chapel. The manor's healer, a middle-aged woman skilled in herbs and poultices, greeted him with a gentle nod. Inside, shelves held dried plants, chamomile, sage, comfrey, and clay pots containing salves. A few villagers rested on wooden cots, one with a mild fever, another with a sprained ankle from a fall, and a child recovering from a winter cough. The knight checked on their conditions, offering quiet reassurance. He inquired whether the healer had enough supplies. She mentioned needing fresh honey and beeswax soon for medicinal mixtures. The knight made a note to speak with the steward about arranging a delivery from the beekeepers. Though he was not a physician, his presence carried weight. Medieval leadership required compassion as much as strength. Before leaving, he thanked the healer for her skill and dedication. The infirmary's calm atmosphere, filled with the scent of herbs, lingered with him as he stepped outside. It was a reminder that every life in the manor was interconnected, and his decisions contributed to the health of the entire community. As dusk settled, the great hall filled with a soft golden glow from candles and torches. Supper consisted of hearty barley stew, small slices of salted meat, and warm bread baked earlier that day. The knight sat near the center, surrounded by those who served the household. The conversation was measured but warmer than at noon. People shared brief stories, updates from the fields, small bits of humor, news brought by the traveling messenger. The knight listened attentively, offering a word here and there, but maintaining the composed demeanor expected of his station. Dogs lay curled near the hearth, occasionally lifting their heads when scraps fell. The atmosphere was gentle, communal, unhurried. When the meal ended, servants cleared the table, and the knight offered a prayer of thanks. The hall quieted once more as everyone dispersed to complete their final tasks of the evening. Outside, the sky deepened from orange to blue, and the manor slipped gradually into the peaceful embrace of night. Before retiring to his chamber, the knight returned to the armory for one final inspection of his equipment, especially given the upcoming journey. The armorer had already made the necessary adjustments. Straps strengthened, chainmail reinforced, small dents hammered smooth. The knight lifted each piece, feeling the balance, the weight, the readiness. He tested the sword's edge with his thumb and inspected the shield's leather grips. These final checks were part ritual, part necessity. Armor that failed at the wrong moment could alter the course of a life. The armorer stood nearby, observing quietly, prepared to make any last-minute changes. When the knight expressed his satisfaction, the craftsman bowed his head slightly, pride visible in his eyes. In the medieval world, mastery was measured not by recognition, but by reliability. The knight left the armory with a sense of confidence. His equipment and the people who cared for it were ready. Night had fully descended when the knight climbed the stone steps to the manor's outer walls. A light breeze rustled his cloak. Guards paced slowly, their lanterns casting long, wavering shadows across the battlements. The knight walked alongside them, checking the gates and corners where darkness pooled. The farmland below was quiet, with only the faint glimmer of cottage fires visible through the distance. Lantern light illuminated the rough stone beneath his boots and the occasional glint of metal from guard helmets. These nightly rounds reaffirmed the balance between peace and preparedness. Even during calm seasons, vigilance remained a constant virtue. The guards appreciated his presence, exchanging soft greetings as he passed. When he reached the far end of the wall, he paused to gaze at the star-filled sky. Without city lights, the medieval heavens shone with breathtaking clarity. He let the silence settle over him before turning back toward the stairway. His rounds complete, he descended into the dim courtyard, where only a few torches flickered. Near the stables, the knight found his squire tending to the last of the day's tasks. The boy brushed Ardent carefully, checking hooves and smoothing the horse's mane until it gleamed in the lantern light. When he saw the knight, he stood up straight, trying to hide his fatigue. The knight inspected the work, offering a few quiet corrections and a rare word of praise. The squire's eyes lit up at the acknowledgement. He reported that the traveling gear was packed and the weapons polished as instructed. The knight nodded, reminding the boy to rest well. Tomorrow would bring another demanding day. The squire bowed respectfully before retreating to his small quarters. Watching him go, the knight remembered his own years of apprenticeship, the long nights, aching muscles, and heavy expectations. Yet it was through such steady repetition that discipline formed. The cycle continued, just as it always had. The knight entered the nearly silent great hall, where only a few logs burned low in the hearth. He sat on a wooden bench and extended his hands toward the warmth. The fire crackled quietly, its dim glow reflecting off old iron pots hanging near the hearth. Medieval halls carried a particular stillness at night, echoes softened by heavy beams, shadows drifting across stone walls. The knight allowed his mind to wander briefly, contemplating the upcoming journey, the duties awaiting tomorrow, and the people who depended on his steady judgment. The flames shifted gently, creating patterns that moved across the hall. These moments were rare, a pause in the otherwise unbroken rhythm of responsibility. But they grounded him, offering a soft reprieve before the world demanded his vigilance again. When the last log collapsed into glowing embers, he rose, feeling both calmed and renewed. The knight made his way through the manor's dim corridors, his footsteps muted by worn rushes scattered across the floor. Wooden beams overhead creaked occasionally as the structure settled into the night's coolness. The faint scent of beeswax lingered from recently extinguished candles. Each door he passed had its own story, rooms belonging to retainers, storerooms filled with grain, chambers for visiting guests. The manor contained an entire world within its walls, each space functioning according to ancient routines shaped long before his birth. As he walked, the knight felt the weight of continuity. How many before him had made this same quiet journey toward rest? How many would follow? The medieval world moved slowly, generation to generation, anchored by traditions that outlived individuals. He reached his chamber door, the corridor silent behind him. Before sleeping, the knight sat at his small table and lit a single oil lamp. Its glow illuminated parchment sheets, an ink pot, and a quill made from a goose feather. He wrote a short account of the day, notes about the messenger's arrival, instructions given to the steward, observations from his patrol, and reminders for tomorrow's journey. Medieval records were simple but practical, ensuring continuity even when tasks stretched across weeks. His handwriting was neat and deliberate, shaped by years of practice. After finishing his notes, he added a quiet personal reflection, something he did not always share with anyone, but felt necessary to ground his thoughts. When the ink dried, he folded the parchment and placed it carefully inside a wooden box. Closing the lid, he extinguished the lamp, plunging the room into a soft, moonlit calm. Writing had emptied his mind, leaving space for rest. The knight undressed slowly, folding his tunic on a stool and setting his boots neatly beside the bed. He checked the shutters, ensuring they were firmly latched against the night air, then draped an extra wool blanket across the straw mattress. Medieval beds were simple, but arranged with care: a linen sheet, stuffed mattress, and layered blankets for warmth. He placed his sword in its stand beside the bed, always within reach even in peaceful times. The room carried a faint scent of lavender, placed by a servant earlier to deter insects. The knight lay down, feeling the day's physical fatigue settle into his muscles. He closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again to listen, an old habit. The manor was quiet. No footsteps, no sudden noises. Satisfied, he exhaled slowly and allowed his body to sink deeper into the mattress. As the night drifted toward sleep, the world around him softened. The moon cast thin beams of light through the edges of the shutters, tracing pale lines across the floor. Somewhere in the manor, a guard's footsteps echoed faintly, steady and predictable. A late breeze rattled branches outside, whispering against the stone walls. These small sounds wove into a tapestry of medieval night, a silence that was never absolute, always layered with subtle life. The knight's breathing slowed as he surrendered to rest. His thoughts blurred gently. Images of the training yard, the fields, the chapel, the armory. They passed quietly like pages turning in a book, each memory softening at the edges. Medieval nights invited contemplation even in sleep, and the knight slipped into that depth easily, wrapped in the steady rhythm of duty fulfilled. In sleep, the knight dreamed again, not of battles or glory, but of service. He saw himself walking the manor grounds at dawn, guiding squires in training, caring for his horse, repairing fences, listening to villagers, standing beside his lord during quiet councils. These dreams reflected the life he valued: structure, discipline, humility. The medieval world rarely offered stories of heroism. It offered opportunities for persistence. In the dream, the knight carried a lantern along the walls, illuminating the path ahead. The light flickered but remained steady, just as he aspired to be. Steady through hardship, steady through peace, steady through uncertainty. When the dream shifted, he found himself once again in the training yard, wooden swords tapping softly in the morning mist. These visions did not disturb him. They soothed him, reinforcing his sense of purpose even in unconsciousness. As dawn approached once more, soft light crept into the chamber, brushing the knight's face with warmth. He stirred gently, opening his eyes to the muted glow of the new day. The manor began to wake around him. Distant footsteps, murmured voices, the clatter of buckets being carried to the kitchen. The knight sat up, stretching the stiffness from his arms and shoulders. A new day awaited him, nearly identical to the one before. Yet in this repetition lay the essence of medieval life. Duty was not a burden, it was a rhythm. Training, stewardship, prayer, leadership, vigilance. Each day shaped by the same quiet cycle. As he stood and dressed, the knight felt a familiar sense of readiness. The world outside remained uncertain, but his purpose did not. The cycle of a knight's life continued, steady, disciplined, unwavering, quietly sustaining the world around him, one ordinary day at a time. And now, our long walk beside the medieval knight comes to an end. The torches along the walls fade, The training yard grows quiet, and the manor settles into its nightly breath. You've watched him work, guide, teach, listen, and finally rest. His day shaped not by triumph, but by patient attention to the world around him. Let that calmness follow you now. Let the weight of his steady routine ease your own thoughts. There is nothing left to do tonight. No more duties, no more noise. Just rest, breathe softly, and let the gentle quiet of the medieval night carry you into deep, peaceful sleep.